How consciousness can guide us away from the edge. I want you to imagine something. Picture yourself standing at the edge of a cliff. Below is an abyss. Vast and dark. Behind you lies the familiar. But it feels suffocating. Stagnant. You're not sure whether to leap into the unknown or retreat to the comfort of what you know. In this moment, your consciousness, the part of you that observes, feels, and questions, is your only companion. It whispers to you, urging you not to move blindly but to see, to feel, to understand. But what does it mean to let consciousness guide us? How does it have the power to pull us back from the brink of despair, poor decisions, or even self-destruction? These questions form the foundation of our journey together. We often associate consciousness with thought. But let me challenge you, is consciousness thought? Or is it something beyond? Have you ever paused to observe the voice inside your head, the one that narrates, judges, plans? Who is the one listening to that voice? You see, there's a difference between being lost in the noise of the mind and observing it. The moment you become aware of the noise, you step into a deeper space of being. That is where consciousness begins to guide. Imagine, for instance, you're faced with a life-altering decision. Perhaps it's leaving a toxic relationship, choosing a career path, or confronting your own fears. When we are overwhelmed, our thoughts become like waves crashing against the shore, chaotic, relentless. But if you sit still for a moment, and simply observe those waves without acting, something remarkable happens. You start to see patterns. You notice the pull of fear, the whispers of intuition, the echo of past experiences. Consciousness is not about silencing the storm, it's about recognizing the calm beneath it. Here's a question for you to consider. When was the last time you truly stopped and asked yourself, who am I beyond my thoughts, my roles, and my identity? This question might feel unsettling, but don't dismiss it too quickly. Let it linger. The edge we face in life often comes from clinging to an identity we think defines us, a job title, a relationship, a belief system. Consciousness, when embraced fully, begins to loosen these ties, not to strip us of meaning, but to free us from the limitations of false meaning. Now, let's look at the practical. Consciousness is not an abstract concept reserved for philosophers or mystics. It's as real as your breath. Take a moment, right now, to focus on your breath. Breathe in deeply and exhale slowly. Feel the sensation of air entering your lungs, filling your body with life, and then releasing. In that moment, were you thinking about your fears, your worries, or your regrets? Or were you simply present? That presence, however fleeting, is the gateway to consciousness. And it's in that state that clarity begins to emerge. Let me ask you this, how often do you operate on autopilot? We rush through life, working, planning, consuming, without ever stopping to truly engage with what we are doing. Think about your morning routine. Did you taste your coffee today? Or did you sip it while scrolling through your phone? Did you notice the sunlight streaming through the window? Or were you already lost in thoughts about your to-do list? Each moment we live unconsciously is a step closer to the edge. Each moment we reclaim through awareness is a step back toward balance. There's another layer to this exploration. And it's one we often overlook. How does consciousness shape our relationships? Think of a time you reacted in anger, said something you later regretted, or withdrew because of fear. In those moments, We are not guided by consciousness but by reflex. Reflex comes from pain, from habit, from unresolved wounds. Consciousness, however, pauses. It asks, what is this reaction teaching me? What does the other person's behavior reveal about their own pain? When we approach relationships with awareness, we stop playing the game of blame and begin the work of understanding. But consciousness is not just about pausing and observing. It's also about action. Not impulsive action, but deliberate, mindful steps. When you listen to your consciousness, you might find yourself drawn to paths that initially seem irrational. You may feel a pull to leave a high-paying job for a simpler, more meaningful life. You might feel called to forgive someone who deeply hurt you. Not because they deserve it, but because your own heart deserves freedom. Let me pose another question. Are you living your life? Or are you being lived by your circumstances? Consciousness allows us to take the reins. It reminds us that we are not our past, our failures, or even our successes. We are the awareness behind it all. And from that awareness, we can chart a new course. Yet, this journey is not without its challenges. To embrace consciousness is to face truths we may have avoided. It is to sit with discomfort, to unearth buried pain, and to confront the parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore. But what's the alternative? To remain at the edge, paralyzed by fear, ruled by the unconscious patterns that keep us stuck. Or to step into the unknown with trust that consciousness will guide us, not always to safety, but to growth, to authenticity, to peace. As we close this part of our exploration, I want to leave you with a thought. Consciousness is not something you gain, it's something you uncover. It has always been within you, waiting patiently. The question is, are you ready to listen? The inner compass, trusting the unseen force of consciousness. As we continue, let us imagine consciousness not as a destination to be reached, but as an inner compass that silently, persistently points us toward a truer path. This compass doesn't come with a map. It doesn't promise safety or predictability. But it does offer something far more valuable, alignment with the essence of who we are. Why, then, do we resist this compass? Why do we hesitate to trust it, even when it calls to us in moments of stillness? One reason is fear, the fear of losing control. Our minds are masters of creating narratives. And those narratives often revolve around maintaining control over our lives. Yet, paradoxically, the more we cling to control, the more we drift away from the guidance of consciousness. Here's a question for you. When was the last time you surrendered, not out of defeat, but out of trust? Surrendering to consciousness doesn't mean giving up, it means letting go of the illusion that we must have all the answers. Think of a time when you made a decision purely from intuition, without overthinking. Perhaps you felt an inexplicable pull toward a certain choice, even though logic told you otherwise. And yet, when you followed that pull, it led you to something extraordinary, a new opportunity, a profound relationship, or a moment of deep clarity. That pull is the whisper of consciousness. But how do we distinguish the voice of consciousness from the noise of fear, desire, and doubt? This is where the practice of awareness becomes essential. Consider this analogy. Imagine your mind as a turbulent river, filled with rushing water, debris, and noise. If you try to navigate it while standing in the current, you'll be swept away. But if you step onto the riverbank and watch, you'll begin to see the patterns, the calm beneath the chaos. This stepping back is the practice of awareness. It allows you to observe your thoughts and emotions without being consumed by them. Let's bring this into practical terms. The next time you face a difficult decision, try this: sit quietly, close your eyes, and take a few deep breaths. Instead of asking, "What should I do?" ask, "What feels true?" Notice the sensations in your body. Does one option feel expansive, light, and open? Does another feel heavy, constricting, or uneasy? Your body is often a more reliable guide than your mind, for it is less burdened by the stories you've told yourself. Now, let's explore the relationship between consciousness and purpose. Many of us live with the underlying belief that our purpose is something to be found, like a hidden treasure waiting to be unearthed. But what if purpose is not something external? What if it is something we create by aligning our actions with the truth of who we are? When you live in alignment with consciousness, purpose is not a question to be answered but a path that unfolds naturally. You stop asking, "What is my purpose?" and start living as though every moment is purposeful. Ask yourself this: are your daily actions in harmony with your inner truth? Or are they driven by the expectations of others? This question is not meant to judge but to awaken. Many of us spend our lives climbing a ladder, only to realize it's leaning against the wrong wall. Consciousness invites us to step back, to reassess, and to choose a path that reflects our deepest values. This brings us to a profound realization: consciousness is not just about guiding us away from the edge, it is about transforming the edge itself. The edge, after all, is not inherently dangerous. It is simply a boundary, a point of transition. What makes it terrifying is our resistance to change, our fear of the unknown. But when you approach the edge with awareness, it becomes a place of potential. It is where growth happens, where old identities dissolve, and new possibilities emerge. Here's a practical exercise to explore this. Think of an area in your life where you feel stuck or afraid to move forward. Instead of viewing it as a problem to solve, try seeing it as an edge, a space where transformation is waiting to occur. Write down your fears, your doubts, and then ask yourself, what would happen if I leaned into this edge with trust, instead of pulling away? The answers may surprise you. But let's not ignore the fact that this journey is deeply personal. No one else can walk it for you. Others may offer guidance, wisdom, and support. But ultimately, it is you who must listen to the whisper of your inner compass. And yet, there is beauty in this solitude, for it reminds us of our power. You are not separate from the universe, you are an expression of it. The same intelligence that guides the stars, that orchestrates the seasons, is present within you. The more you attune to it, the more you realize that you are never truly alone. Now, I want to ask you a question that might unsettle you. If you stripped away all the labels, all the stories you've told yourself about who you are, what would remain? This is not a question to be answered quickly. Let it simmer. Let it challenge you. The answer is not something you think but something you feel, a quiet knowing that emerges when the noise of the mind subsides. As we near the end of this part, let us reflect on the essence of consciousness. It is not a destination, nor is it a tool to be wielded. It is a way of being, a state of presence that allows you to navigate life with clarity, grace, and courage. When you trust this inner compass, you stop fearing the edge and start seeing it as an invitation, a doorway to a deeper, more authentic existence. Walking the path of light, embracing the courage to act with consciousness. As we step into the final leg of this journey, let us remember that consciousness is not passive. It does not ask us merely to observe or reflect, it asks us to act. And yet, acting with consciousness requires a kind of courage that is rare in our world, a courage that stems not from bravado but from authenticity, humility, and trust in the unseen. So, how do we walk this path of light? How do we embody consciousness in a world that often feels overwhelming, chaotic, and driven by forces beyond our control? The first step is to recognize that consciousness is a practice, not a destination. Just as a musician practices scales or an athlete trains their body, living with awareness requires daily commitment. You will stumble. You will fall into old patterns. But each moment offers a new opportunity to return, to begin again. Let me ask you this: how often do you pause in your daily life to ask, is this choice aligned with who I want to be? This question is simple, yet its implications are profound. Every action we take, no matter how small, shapes the trajectory of our lives. When we act unconsciously, we drift. But when we act with awareness, we take deliberate steps toward a life of meaning and purpose. Consider the power of intention. Many of us move through life reacting to circumstances rather than creating them. We wake up, go through our routines, and respond to what the world throws at us. But what if, instead, you began each day by setting an intention? Not a rigid plan, but a guiding principle, a quiet declaration of how you wish to show up in the world. For instance, you might set the intention to be patient, to listen deeply, or to approach challenges with curiosity instead of fear. Intention transforms consciousness from a passive state into an active force. But what happens when the path becomes difficult? When life throws us challenges that feel insurmountable? This is where many falter, mistaking the presence of struggle for the absence of guidance. Let me remind you of something profound: consciousness does not eliminate struggle, it transforms your relationship to it. Think of a caterpillar struggling to emerge from its cocoon. From the outside, the struggle seems harsh, even cruel. But without it, the butterfly would never strengthen its wings enough to fly. Similarly, our struggles are not meant to break us but to prepare us for the flight. Here's an exercise to try: the next time you face a challenge, instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What is this teaching me?" This shift in perspective, though subtle, is transformative. It moves you from victimhood to empowerment, from resistance to acceptance. And when you accept the lessons of the moment, you open yourself to growth in ways you could never predict. But growth requires more than reflection, it requires action. This is where courage comes in, the courage to step into the unknown, to risk failure, to embrace vulnerability. Conscious action is rarely the easiest path. It often means standing against the tide, making choices that others may not understand, or confronting truths that are uncomfortable. But here's the paradox: the more you act with consciousness, the more aligned your life becomes, and the less external validation you need. You realize that true fulfillment comes not from what others think of you, but from living in integrity with your inner truth. I want to ask you something deeply personal: what would you do if you weren't afraid? Fear, for most of us, is the silent force that keeps us tethered to the edge, paralyzed and hesitant. But fear, when approached with awareness, becomes a doorway. It reveals to us the places where we have yet to grow, the stories we still cling to, the wounds we have yet to heal. What if, instead of running from your fear, You turn toward it. What if you saw it as a guide, pointing you toward the very thing you need to face? Walking the path of consciousness also means embracing the interconnectedness of all things. We are not islands, isolated and alone. Every action we take ripples out into the world, affecting not only ourselves but also those around us. When you act with awareness, you contribute to the collective awakening of humanity. Your courage inspires others to find their own. Your kindness creates a chain reaction of compassion. This is the quiet power of consciousness. It transforms not only the individual but the world. Let's reflect on this. Have you ever experienced a moment of profound connection, where you felt deeply in tune with another person, with nature, or with life itself? That feeling is not a coincidence. It is a glimpse of what life can be when lived with consciousness. The more you cultivate this state, the more these moments become your reality. But let's not romanticize this journey. Consciousness is not about achieving a perfect state of being. It is messy, imperfect, and often uncomfortable. You will doubt yourself. You will face setbacks. You will wonder if it's all worth it. And yet, each time you return to awareness, you strengthen the connection to your inner compass. You learn to trust yourself, to trust life, and to trust the unfolding of your unique path. As we near the end of this exploration, let me leave you with one final question. What legacy do you want to leave behind? Not in terms of wealth, achievements, or accolades, but in the hearts of those you touch. Consciousness is the greatest gift you can give, to yourself, to others, and to the world. It is the light that guides us away from the edge and into a life of meaning, purpose, and peace. In closing, remember this: the edge is not the end. It is the beginning. And when you choose to walk the path of light, guided by the quiet power of consciousness, you are choosing not just to live, but to truly awaken.